My name's Brian Murphy. As Merle said, I work for a little company called Dell Technologies. And then you're thinking, why should I listen to this guy? Why should I believe him? Be a pessimistic SRE. I love that. Do your thing. So just a little bit about me. I officially got an SRE title back in 2016, and have been doing SRE for a few different companies throughout that time, up and down, managing, architecting, all of that kind of stuff. I've been a Grafana user since 2018, and we've been using Grafana Cloud, or I've been using Grafana Cloud since about 2020 or 2021. So I have quite the history with this stack. And so what are we talking about, right? Like, why am I here today? I want to tell you about this journey that we're taking within Dell ISG. This observability journey, going to a new place. And most importantly, I want to talk to you about why it matters. Because I think that's the really important part, because I can tell you a journey. You're all on that journey. But I want to tell you why it matters to me and why it should matter to you. Also, I'm pretty enthusiastic. I'll walk around. Hopefully, I don't fall off the stage. I haven't fallen off one yet, but if I do, just applaud and send me back up on stage, please. So we wanted to take this journey, right? Like all of you are taking that journey, or you're in some part of that process, right? So why did we want to take that journey? And within Dell ISG, we want to improve reliability, right? We want to make our partners, not our customers. We're internal facing. So we want to make sure our partners are happy and successful. And we want to improve all those MTTXs and gray area on what all those X's are and if you can actually improve them. But we're sure that we can improve mean time to alert, mean time to acknowledge, mean time to assemble. Those are the things that we definitively can do. We want to make sure that we're accurately measuring these systems, right? We want to make sure we understand what all of our services are doing, nuts and bolts style, and really get that baseline and say, where are we now? Where do we want to be? And then figure out how to get there. And a big part of that is around consolidating our telemetry, right? Optimizing our tooling. If I showed you a cloud of all the, monitoring, you'd probably I'll be very familiar with these kind of clouds of tools, but it's too much. It's too many. And we'll see a little bit more of that in a minute. So what do I do at Dell, right? What does my team do? My team does not make laptops. We do not make monitors. I cannot get you a discount on Alienware hardware. I work within the ISG group, so that's the Infrastructure Solutions group. You could think of it as like legacy EMC, so we build those big boxes. And I work within a particular group called TechOps 2.0. And we own what we call the North Star tooling. So Jira, Confluence, GitHub Enterprise, Jenkins, all of those things that our partners, other Dell Technology engineers, rely on every day to make their jobs happen. We also own a fairly sophisticated build pipeline. So all of the, people write their code, and we put it in this pipeline, and then we get it onto those big pizza boxes. That's what we do. And one of the new things that we're really starting to hammer in on is what we're calling the developer-ready experience. So this is an IDP, right, an internal developer platform. And we see this as a major step forward for us. And so what else do we do, right? So we own all of these globally distributed data centers, right? Because all these people are building stuff. They've got hardware. They've got these big pizza boxes, and they got to go somewhere. So we own all of these dev data centers that are globally distributed. We also manage an internal cloud. So if an engineer wants a VM, they go to our DRX, they spin it up, and they're off to the races. We also own Kubernetes clusters, and then we all own all the hardware and the networking that goes along with it. And this is a little bit what the scope looks like, right? It's over 250,000 pieces of kit, and that's from vCenter servers to VMs, blades, switches, ends of racks, center of racks, all sorts of stuff. This is actually a picture from one of our dev data centers. I think this is the prettiest picture of one I've ever seen. Typically, when I look into any of them, because if you go into any of our offices or buildings, you typically see these dev centers within the middle of them. And it's not chaos. Like, the chords look nice, right? We do good chord management. But people are racking and stacking left and right. And one of the interesting things is that we have these 400 switches that a few teams monitor. And it's across 10 different sites. And the hardware is all different. So we run Dell, Cisco, Arista. Obviously, we're trying to get rid of some of those and focus on others. But there's a lot going on there. And to do that, what we'd been doing historically is we've been running this other product called SolarWinds. And you might have seen SolarWinds in that Big Tent picture. I can't remember if their logo was in there, but sure, this fits into the Big Tent philosophy. And we've been running SolarWinds, and we're running it on-prem. We own the hardware. We did all of that stuff, and it had a lot of good things going for it, right? It's been around a while. It's pretty robust. It does what it says on the tin, right? The network performance monitoring does exactly that. Had a couple cool features that the teams were leveraging, but then it had problems too. There were things that we didn't like so much about it, and two of those, the most important ones, is that it's very niche. It does this one thing, and that's really what it does. And it's also a silo. And then between the teams, usage was spotty and all that. And for all of the people I work with in contracting and procurement, it was a big number to them, a number that they didn't really like and they weren't happy with, let's say. So what's the problem here, right? So these switches are monitored globally, right? We have a follow the sun model. We have team members in, China, India, Cork, Ireland, Massachusetts, Texas, Santa Clara, globally, right? Follow the sun model. Each of these teams leverage this tool differently. Some teams would use this one particular dashboard. Other teams would use a write capability where you could hand write stuff into SolarWinds. And then some teams wouldn't use it at all. And I'd be like, hey, what do you do with SolarWinds? And they'd be like, oh, we don't use SolarWinds. And I'm like, well, what about this alert that you just received? And they're like, oh, yeah, I just get that email. And it's like, yeah, that's SolarWinds. But cool, we'll figure that out, no problem. And then another problem we had is that these alerts, I mentioned it in the other ones, but they're not very smart. The alerts we were getting were naive. And the distribution list that these alerts were going to was broad and too far. And so what would end up happening is someone in Cork would get an alert, Cork, Ireland, would get an alert that a fan is down in a box in Bangalore. And they'd say, so what? Nobody's flying me from Cork, Ireland to Bangalore to fix this problem. Why am I getting alerted to this? This is noise, right? And so, harping back on something said earlier today, we want to reduce noise. Big problem for us. And the other thing we had was that, two other things, is that the infrastructure was self-hosted. So we ran it ourselves. Anytime there was a problem, we typically had to call up SolarWinds, and they had to work through some of these corruptions that we were seeing and going from there. And we really wanted to get away from this silo, because that's what it did. It talked to itself. It didn't integrate with anything else. We didn't have it talking to anything else. If you wanted to do anything that wasn't in SolarWinds, you had to switch tabs. You had to log into some other system. It was a silo, and I hate silos. I don't hate them. I disapprove of silos. So what did we do? I started talking about, or the team, not me, the team started talking about introducing a new way forward in observability, right? A new path for us. And we had a couple bake-offs, and we did a few things, and we decided that the LGTM stack was the direction that we wanted to go. It was going to bring the things together to break down those walls, to break down those silos. So like any great lazy SRE, I stole this slide. You've probably seen this before. I didn't write this. I'm lazy in hopefully the best way possible, just like you should all be lazy in the best way possible, and just when you see something smart, just reuse it, right? So what do we do, right? As the team, right? We're talking about switches. What do we do? And booyah, this is what we did. We connected some, exporters to an agent, and we started sending stuff to the cloud. Well, enterprise first, but then cloud, and maybe we'll talk about why. So what did we really do, right? Like, what was this process like? What did it look like? So the team built out quite a few things, right? Because they went from having their SolarWinds agent that did all the things for the most part to start having to do a few other things. And the beauty of that is that we actually got information that we didn't have access to before, which was cool. So we built out, SNMP exporters, Grafana agents. We unlocked some of the Node exporter, some of the black box exporter, some really cool stuff going on in there. And one of the awesome things that I would love to come back to at some point, or not me, but we'll get there, is some of these SNMP configuration files. We had some really interesting relabeling schemes. I'll show a picture a little bit in a minute of what SNMP data looks like. If you've ever looked at MIBs or OIDs, it's a wild, I see some nodding heads, people know what I'm talking about. It's wild. And so this guy on my team, Chris Longfield, this is my positive peer pressure moment. My coworker, Chris Longfield, said he was going to write up a blog post about this cool stuff that we did with him. So this is recorded now. You are all witnesses. So help me positively peer pressure him into writing that blog post, because I think it's going to be cool. We did a bunch of other stuff too, right? Alerts, notifications, persona-based dashboards, some really cool stuff, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a minute. And two of the things that I really want to call, because I want to dive into it, because it's really important, and I think it, again, layers on what people have said already, is that we leverage two things pretty well. So adaptive metrics, I say rules, because that's what you do. You write rules for reducing it, but it's also adaptive metric rules. It's like one of those things. And then we built out this private probe infrastructure, which leverages synthetics, and it uses some of our geographically distributed sites. I'll dive into that as well, a little bit more detail. That tree button doesn't do anything. So adaptive metrics, right? If you're not familiar with what it does, is it takes those metrics that you never look at, that you have no alerts on, that you have no dashboards related to, that you don't do anything with, and it says, why are you sending these to us? You don't use them. Save yourself some money. Don't do that. So that's what we did, right? All the heads nodding earlier, the SNMP data that we're getting from those exporters is so verbose. You think the Kubernetes data is verbose, SNMP is very verbose. And so we wrote up some of these rules, and we stopped shipping those unused metrics. And here in this pretty little diagram that you're all very familiar with is metrics over time. So the green one is what we're saving. The yellow one is the metrics that we're saving plus what we're not. So the yellow line is the things that we're getting aggregated away. At some point in, I think that's October, we started adding more servers, so adding more switches. So each switch was probably about 8,000 active series on its own. And you could see what ended up happening is because of the adaptive metrics rules, we only started capturing a few of those items because we didn't need all the rest of that stuff. We weren't looking at it. We weren't doing anything with it. So the gap is the savings, right? And my procurement people love savings. So they're very happy with that. And on the engineering side, it's great too because you don't have to look at junk that's not useful. Maybe it's useful to someone somewhere, but it's not useful to us. So if we can get rid of it, if we can hide it away, if we don't even have to look at it, then it's so much better and it's just so much easier to work through. And then also, we did the synthetics probes. So as you may well know, Dell does a lot of hardware. So we run a lot of these dev centers. We run a lot of these big data centers, and we do all this stuff. All of these things are behind firewalls. We have a very diligent and wonderful security staff that works with us to make sure we're not doing anything foolhardy, silly, or foolish. But it makes it really hard to monitor some of these things from a cloud provider. So what we did is we wrote up this private probe infrastructure really basic stuff, honestly, really basic. But we integrated it really nicely with Grafana Cloud, and it provided us all of this view without sort of the reach back from Grafana Cloud, which is cool. And it allows us to do all sorts of things, right? We can monitor the monitors. We could do all sorts of stuff. And it gives us a great view of the degradation for our network traffic. Now, this picture's cool because I thought it looked like Dory from Finding Nemo. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of red in it because the team at Dell is so great. We keep our networks running smooth and happy. But there is a tiny smidge of red in one of those circles coming off of the top leftmost node into that. And that's coming from a data center that has notoriously bad latency just all the time. So yeah, we do see problems. And when we do see problems, these graphs help us. In our case, we understand that network has notoriously bad latency, so it's not a problem. It doesn't blow through the SLO. What does it look like, right? So remember I said some persona-based dashboards. So we want to put things in front of executives. We have executives. They like to know how things are going within the world that we live in. And we also want to put dashboards in front of people that fix problems, right? That are doing on-call, that are doing the support work, that are doing things like that. So we built out a few of these dashboards with the teams, and executives seem to be happy with how they look. The teams are happily using them, solving problems, making things happen. And there's cool stuff that comes along with it as well. And we've started adding alerting, right? We've started bringing the alerting to the people who need it and doing it in a smart and hopefully better fashion. But it's cool, good pictures, good stuff, good dashboards. So let's talk about how to go. So one of the things I didn't mention is that one of the impetus for starting this, or maybe it's auxiliary, I'm not sure, is that we had a renewal coming up with SolarWinds. And the renewal was at the end of December. And if we weren't going to renew, we had to tell them 30 days in advance. So we had to tell them at some point in the middle of November that we weren't going to do this. This project started out as a POC, a POV. We didn't call it a POC because it wasn't a proof of concept. We believed in the concept. We believe in observability. We called it a proof of value, right? Because we knew that one of these products was going to bring us value. And we picked Grafana Labs because it felt like the best value. And so it started out as a POV, and then somebody said, hey, we don't want to renew SolarWinds. We want to recap that money. We want that money back. Can you make this thing happen? And so at some point in late July, we sat down with the teams, distributed teams, Cork, Ireland, China, and said, how do we do this, right? What are your use cases? Give me what do you do in SolarWinds? How do you use this tool? What do you make it happen? And so we began those conversations. And then at some point in September, we had aggregated all that, we had accumulated all that stuff, and we actually started getting hands on keyboards, right? We started pushing out new agents. We started creating dashboards. We started creating these alerts. And just, it's not a never-ending journey, but it's always an evolution when it comes to dashboards and alerts. But for the most part, the configuration files and all that was in place. And so, happy news. At the beginning of November, we officially turned down SolarWinds, and we had moved everyone over to the LGTM stack. And what was nice, because we could roll it out so quickly, is that we could run both side by side for a while so that the team could get the training, they could get the experience to make sure that they were comfortable, right? Because these people are going to use it every day to make sure, switches are up. When switches go down, we have upset engineers. They're not big fans of that. It turns into you know how it goes. So happy news. We made it happen. and we hit our deadline. And to me, hitting the deadline was good. But more importantly to me is that we didn't lose anything, right? Our observability of the hardware and the network maintained, right? It was on point. It continued, right? Nobody noticed. Nobody was like, oh, no partners, no customers complained, right? There was a zero gap in reliability, and there was no negative impact. So to me, that was the big win moment. Now, there are some gaps, right? Like, nothing's perfect. Nothing's a one-to-one mapping. So one of the things that we've seen is that, oh, that's a color. OK, yeah, cool. Is that walking these MIBs can be very slow. And on some of these legacy hardwares, it can be extremely slow. Like you can't imagine, like, why is this taking 30 minutes? Like, this is crazy. Some reason, for some magical ability, SolarWinds could handle that. SNMP Exporter can't, right? So some of these older things, we're not monitoring as well as we want. And it's OK, because these are some of the switches that we're trying to unload, but we're still working with the SNMP team, the SNMP Exporter team, to make that better. And then we also had another issue where some teams were using SolarWinds to write data. Like, they'd say, reserve this subnet, reserve this private subnet so no one else can do it. We don't have a good way to do that in Grafana Labs yet, so we're still looking for something to do there. We could easily say what IPs are free and what are used, but there's no sort of reservation style. So we're still looking through some of that. And then, of course, knowledge sharing, right? Like, everyone's going to have a knowledge gap. We still have these teams in these 3-5 different locations. Each one of them has a different knowledge. So training, we keep going with that, documentation and training. This is the cool part, right? This is why it matters, right? So this is our first pane of glass for incidents. This is where we want people to go. We want them to go to Grafana. We want them to start there, right? That's where all the alerts do. The alerts have the runbooks, and they say, go look at this dashboard. Go look at this piece of information. It's right in Grafana. It's right in the dashboard. And then that way they're not switching between 6 different devices unless they have to. We're also leveraging the on-call integration. So before, we just blasted an email, and anyone that was on that email list would get it. Any of my Dell colleagues will tell you that they probably get a lot of alerts that they probably don't care about. And we're working to fix that. So stick with us. There's also one less service to support and maintain. We could take the people that were feeding and nurturing the SolarWinds instances, and we could move them on to something cooler, newer, better, more fun, more interesting, what have you. Back to my procurement people, budget settings. So what's next for us, right? We have a lot of plans, right? So I just talked to you about the Switch team, but we have 40 or 50 other teams and services that we're actively migrating, right? Like Artifactory, Jira, Confluence, our Kubernetes, our OpenShift. Like, all of those people we want to bring under this roof with us so that we can make really smart, really get away from those naive alerts and make those really smart qualified alerts. And we want to share all this stuff, right? So I showed you those dashboards earlier about the switch data. We have a new team that monitors thousands of other switches. Guess what? We're just bringing them the same dashboards, and they're getting the value. We just added a data source selector. That was it. That's all we had to do to make these dashboards cool and new for them, is just add that data source selector. We want to do more SLO-based alerting. We still have a lot of problem sort of alerting. Oh, this fan's hot, or fan's hot. CPU's high, fans down, stuff like that. We really want to focus on experience. Then there's a bunch of other stuff. We're looking at Bela right now. Bela was released 2 weeks ago, or talked about big. I don't know when, but we've been hounding Nicola because we found a problem that we said this could be a good place for tracing. Like, this is where we want to use tracing. Let's bring in Bela to do this. And the team has been super gracious and super helpful in making that happen. Adaptive telemetry, we use it for metrics. We want it for logging. We send a lot of logs. We don't look at them all. We want to do that. Onboarding more teams, onboarding more services. And Of course, I can't end without saying thank you, because I'm one person standing on stage, but there was literally 1,000 people, it felt like, working on this, happily making things happen, getting stuff done, people in this room, people all around the globe. I just want to make sure I thank them, and thank you all for listening. Appreciate it.